bet I could get there with an army if I tried hard enough, and what if we could seize the oil fields of Baku? The only other good source anywhere around Europe was in Romania. And about 1917, all the great powers realized we got to get ourselves some oil. And the British and the French and the Germans, three of the great powers on the world stage when the First World War started, none of them had good access to large amounts of oil. It's hard to suggest that there is any bigger national security concern for those nations at this point than to secure themselves a supply of this century's great energy source, and the one that's needed to power the most cutting-edge weapons that you need to win any war. It's easy to be critical of these people pursuing these kinds of policies, but look at what the stakes are. And from a purely realpolitik, down and dirty standard, the arguments for imperialism in this case make a certain kind of sense. I mean, what they're saying, for example, amongst British politicians, some of whom do not want to go in and control these areas. The Prime Minister before the current Prime Minister in 1917, Herbert Asquith, he didn't want anything to do with this region and all of its problems and factionalism. I mean, the Arab tribes that were fighting on Britain's side as part of the Arab Revolt were only part of the Arabs out there. There were a lot of other Arabs that were very loyal to the Ottoman government. You had Sunni and Shiite issues to deal with. I mean, to Asquith, it looked like a hornet's nest. But he had a hard time fighting against the people on the other side of the argument who were making the point that you were then going to simply cede whatever could be taken from the Ottomans once they were gone to your great power rivals. I mean, the French will go in and take the oil, perhaps, and then they're strengthened while you are weakened and you don't have any access to the coal of the 20th century. As Asquith eventually said, he said, quote, "If we were to leave the other nations to scramble for Turkey without taking anything ourselves, we should not be doing our duty," end quote. Well, if not having access to your own oil meant that your country would fall to a second-class status, I think there would have been a lot of people in Britain, a democratic government, who would have said that it was their politicians' duty to see that that didn't happen. Now, the last time we checked in with the story in the Middle East and all that area concerning the Ottomans fighting against the British and the French and the British Dominion troops from places like India and South Africa and Australia and New Zealand, places like that, that the war hadn't been going particularly well. The Turks were tough. They put up a pretty darn good resistance for a country that was supposed to be basically done, having just fought a couple of wars previously. Economics were in a disaster and everything, and instead the Turks put up a pretty darn spirited resistance. They've got the Germans in there helping them to modernize a little here and there, and the British simply were not prepared, and who could be, for the logistical challenges of trying to maintain large armies, which the British didn't tend to maintain in the field anyway throughout their history, in the middle of the desert. The challenges were huge. The Turks were tough. The British essentially had to retreat from Gallipoli. They got trapped in a place called Kut, like we told you in an earlier episode, and had to surrender. It was not exactly their finest hour, but in their defense, most of their effort is in the meat grinder area